this team this year, and it's just like we don't hang our heads too long on losses. You know what I'm saying? We took 24 hours what we needed and just moving on.
Yeah, disappointed with the outcome Saturday, but 1-0 is a mentality and a lifestyle that we live by, and we know we have to refocus. In this league, there's no weeks off.
We got a lot of respect for him, and it's going to be a fun one on Saturday.
And welcome back into the Tiger Kickoff Show, presented by the Columbia Missourian. I'm your host, Harrison Vapnek from KOMU 8 Sports, joined alongside the beat writers of the Mizzou football team, Wendell Shepherd, Ryerson, Brandon Haynes. Back to the normal edition of Style Points. I'm putting the blue shades back on. We went off track last week. I think that's the reason Mizzou lost. Us four have to take full accountability of the loss to Georgia. How are we doing, guys?
Yeah, I think we messed with the mojo a little bit, but I'm doing good.
Yeah, that's good. It was a good time. We missed you here.
Yeah, Adam Ryerson took control of the ship and really led us in the right direction.
It's good to have you back, though. That was a little stressful, not going to lie. So
yeah, I could tell after your show you were like, yay. We'll see that on the year-end Tiger Kickoff Show, memorable moments. Brandon, how are we doing?
We're doing fine. Ready to be back at home in front of a sold-out Mizzou football crowd. 4th straight sellout, first time since 1980. So kind of cool times to be a Mizzou fan.
Yeah, and we all four of us had a great weekend in Athens, but Missouri's hoping to have a great weekend back here in Columbia. The Tigers coming off the 30-21 loss at the hands of the two-time defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs, and they return home to another tough contest. The number 13 team in the country, the Tennessee Volunteers, fresh off a win against UConn. They're 7-2 this year. Mizzou is 7-2 this year. These are two extremely even matched teams. The last 2 years that these two have played, not evenly matched games, 2 blowouts by Josh Heupel and the Volunteers. Wendell, I'll start over with you. Missouri off the close loss to Georgia, a game they had a chance to take the lead with under 7 minutes left to go win the game in Athens. Fell short. What ways can they improve playing a good Tennessee team again on Saturday?
It's not the most fun thing to talk about, but special teams I think is going to end up being a pretty big factor in how Mizzou does. The return game, defending and running the ball was very poor against Georgia. 108-16 was the yards difference there, so that's going to have to get a lot better. Drinkwitz talked on Tuesday about potentially switching up who takes the kickoffs. It has been Mevis, which he's only done this season. He didn't do it at all before, but they're looking at Blake Craig, the true freshman kicker, to possibly handle those duties the last 3 games.
Adam, Missouri's offense scored 1 touchdown on the opening drive on the 39-yard pass from Brady Cook to Luther Burden. They didn't score another touchdown until the 4th quarter when Cody Schrader eventually broke one off. How can the offensive scheme be different in the way they can improve from Georgia to Tennessee?
I don't really know if it has to be different. I think they just need to be more effective with what they're doing. They were able to establish a really good ground game with Cody Schrader. Now that's going to be a little bit tougher against Tennessee, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But I think that they really need to be able to scheme their wide receivers open. They weren't really able to do that against Georgia. They were doing that match one-on-one coverage in man, like we talked about on Monday, and they weren't really able to get separation. Luther Burden kind of got neutralized. We talked about that. So I think they have to be able to scheme those receivers open, and that's something that they've been able to do for the most part of this season. And I think if you can get more guys than just 5 people involved, those are the only people who caught passes in that Georgia game, they're going to be able to have a lot more success. So I think it's just going to be that, scheming guys open and getting the play-action game going early is going to be a really big key for them in this matchup.
Brandon, we talked just about the scoring. 1 touchdown in the 1st quarter, not again until the 4th quarter. We kind of saw a little bit of that in the last couple of games, a slow start against Kentucky before the fake punt touchdown. Against South Carolina, they had an offensive attack in that first half, but really quieted down in the second half. How can this team kind of be more consistent in their scoring runs?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you see this inefficiency, it's the third downs. They went 5 for 13 against Georgia. It hasn't been consistent at all times, and you just got to continue to kind of capitalize. And the biggest key to that, and it goes on both sides of the ball, is capitalizing on 1st and 2nd downs. And if you can kind of set yourself in a position to be successful, get a few yards out of there, you set yourself up for 3rd and manageable, and that's a lot easier to convert on. On the defensive side, it's the same thing. If you can get stops on 1st and 2nd down against Tennessee's backs, it's going to be tough, but if you can limit their yardage, kind of like what Mizzou's done against the run so far, you're able to kind of set yourself up for success. Tennessee's 27th in the nation in both offense and defensive 3rd down percentage, so obviously they're a tougher test. Mizzou ranks 50-plus in both categories there. So it's going to be a key area where if Mizzou can win the 3rd down battle, which is something that Eli Drinkwitz has talked about all season, then they're going to be in a good spot to potentially pull off the upset.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it's upset. The Vegas line has it right now is basically Tennessee -1. It could go either way kind of games, and these two are separated by just one spot in Tuesday night's college football playoff rankings. What matchups are we looking out for this game on Saturday, starting with you, Wendell?
Brandon touched on it a little bit. I think Mizzou is going to have to be able to run the ball. They did that really well against Georgia. They're going to have a little bit tougher test here. I mean, Tennessee's got one of the best rushing defenses in the entire country. So I think if Cody Schrader can have a good day and Mizzou can control the clock, that's going to be pretty big.
Cody Schrader, you look at the numbers, good game against Georgia, 111 yards, but it was a lot of 7-8 yard runs. Didn't really break off for the 53-yard run we saw last year against Georgia. It was just kind of 7-8 yards here and there. And that's kind of been the story of the year for Cody Schrader. He's not a breakaway speed kind of guy, but can get you those yards when you need them. And I think against a good run defense like Tennessee, I think that can go a long way in winning that matchup. Adam, over to you. The Missouri offensive line has had ups and downs this year, probably more downs early in the year, but they're going to play a really good defensive line that Tennessee has. Tell us about that matchup.
Yeah, the defensive line of Tennessee, they're known for their run-stopping defense, like Wendell has said, but they've got two really solid edge rushers in Tyler Barron and James Pierce, combined for 12 total sacks, 18 tackles for loss. But Missouri's tackles have looked really good so far this year. Javon Foster, we knew he was going to come in and he was going to be the leader of that offensive line. He's done exactly that. But Membu on the other side at right tackle, he's looking like a future, maybe first-round pick for Missouri, and he's been dominant. His athleticism is fantastic. But you're really going to have to stop those edge rushers from getting to Brady Cook, especially early on in the game. If you can keep Brady Cook clean in this game, then you're going to have a lot of success throwing the ball downfield with the play-action game and hurting Tennessee vertically.
Brandon, what matchup are you looking out for?
One of the things that I kind of look for, I didn't actually say it before the show, but one of the things to kind of watch out for is just Mizzou's ability to win the turnover margin. Tennessee enters as a +5. They have 4 defensive touchdowns, which actually is a tie for the lead in the nation. They just have an ability to capitalize on opponents' mistakes. And I think, especially in these past couple games, we've seen Brady Cook sometimes struggle at times as the game goes on. And against a Tennessee team that will make you pay for those mistakes, it's going to be big to win that turnover margin and just make a difference kind of in that matchup.
Yeah, Coach Banks, their defensive coordinator, Tennessee, has been there 3 years now. He was at Penn State before. Their defense has gotten better and better over the last couple of years. That was kind of what held them back 2 years ago in Hendon Hooker's first year as a starting quarterback in 2021. They were only like a 7-5 team, but mostly because the defense was pretty inconsistent. Last year, the defense took a step up, and they had a high-power offense with Hendon Hooker, who was a Heisman finalist, until he tore his ACL against South Carolina. This Tennessee team is a lot different than last year's Tennessee team because we mentioned Hooker, and they had Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, who won the Blitnikoff Award for the best receiver in all of college football. That looks nothing like Tennessee's team this year, where it's Joe Milton, a quarterback who's much more of a mistake-prone quarterback, and it feels like sometimes that Josh Heupel and the Tennessee coaching staff maybe doesn't trust him as much, and they're now a heavy run-first team with Jabari Small and Jalen Wright, and they even have a freshman that they've been including in that group as well. Do we think that this game has blowout proof to it? Because the last 2 years, Tennessee's put up, I think, 60 points. Maybe
60 points.
60 points in both. I think 62-24 the game here.
Last year.
And 66 last year. How do the Tigers, other than Tennessee playing a different style of game this year, how do they avoid this happening for a third straight year?
It's interesting because I think if you ask people now, they would say last year's Mizzou defense was better.
Yeah.
A lot better than this year. Mizzou's defense, the last, 3 games has been really, really good. I think that will be a difference. And I think the offense isn't going to just drop off a cliff like they did last year. In last year's game, they scored early in that first half, and then we're just completely out of it for the last 2.5 quarters. But I think the offense is going to be able to control the game much more last year. I think the running attack's a little bit better this year, and passing game's obviously way better.
Yeah, and then we talk about Tennessee's rushing offense. If Tennessee is able to run for, you mentioned before, they have 3 backs who go for 5 yards a carry. If Tennessee's doing that and controlling the clock, how much trust do we have in this Mizzou team for the second straight week really playing from behind a lot of the game? Do we trust that Luther Burden is banged up? He's questionable for Saturday. I think we all think he's going to play, but doesn't mean he's going to be 100%. Missouri's got depth of receiver, Mookie Cooper, Theo Weiss, Mekhi Miller. Can this team play from behind if Tennessee is running the ball and scoring touchdowns on almost every drive?
I think you can against Tennessee just because, like you mentioned earlier, they don't have the individual talent. They're very built to win by committee, but they're not going to be able to just put up big plays one after another like we saw last year. They're not going to have a bunch of big play touchdowns. They kind of have to methodically drive down the field, and that's going to take time off the clock, but their defense has also been susceptible to the big play. So Missouri, who can score very fast, whether it's Luther Burden or somebody else in the field, they're going to be able to do that and play from behind. I mean, obviously in any game you play, you don't want to be playing from behind. But Tennessee is a team that you're going to probably have to win as an offense in the air anyway, just because of how good their run defense has been so far this year. But I don't think if you go down early, Mizzou has in the last 4 of 5 games, you don't really need to be that worried because you know your offense can score.
What's the stat? Mizzou has trailed in the first quarter in 5 out of 6 games?
Something like that.
Almost every game this year they've trailed in the first quarter, even including the Kansas State game.
Yeah.
When Kansas State went up early. Brandon, is there anything in Tennessee's offense, maybe holes or something that they kind of don't do well that Missouri can kind of expose? Because we talk about Joe Milton. He only has thrown 4 interceptions this year. That number could be a lot higher than that. He puts the ball in harm's way more than most quarterbacks in the conference. Is there anything that Missouri can expose, especially on that side of the ball?
I think specifically when looking at the receivers, Mizzou's played better receivers this year, whether it be LSU, Georgia. They've played guys who are kind of on another level than Tennessee's receivers. Now, they still got guys that can make plays, but it's not like last year. It's not with Jalen
Squirrel
Hyde.
White is their top receiver. He's one of my favorite players in all of college football, and like half that is the name.
But, exactly. And another thing is we talk about this running game for Tennessee, right? But when I was kind of researching this game and stuff, Tennessee's towards the bottom of the nation time of possession. So although they control the run game, they just apparently struggle to keep possession of the ball and limit kind of defense's abilities. So if Mizzou can kind of control that tempo and take advantage of that with their own running game and kind of get that consistency, then it could be a very interesting game as far as that goes.
Well, now what's up, Wendell?
Time of possession is an interesting point there because Mizzou played the slowest team in college football already in Kentucky, who routinely takes the ball down. So they
got stops,
and they were behind in that game too. So they've played a team that keeps the ball for a long time, that was built to run the ball. Keep the clock running. So I think Mizzou's built for that. They came from behind that game. They were down 2 scores. So I think they can.
And Ray Davis, who was the leading rusher in the conference at the time, hit over almost 300 yards against Florida. Didn't have the greatest game against Missouri after that first quarter. The Tigers start running defense, especially led by Darius Robinson and Hopper and company, really ended up stuffing them and making a difference in that game, starting in that second quarter.
Yeah, not to mention Tennessee's 6th most penalties in the nation. So another undisciplined team that is coming in here. It's couldn't be in front of the sold-out crowd. Just the noise and the factor of that, it could be an opportunity.
And to chime in one more time, I feel like we're having a lot of really good discussion here. You remember Tennessee going to Georgia last year. Tennessee was the number 1 team in the country. They were undefeated. They had 3 or 4 false start penalties on the first quarter in their first couple of drives. This team has not traveled super well in the last couple of years. And Ryerson, you are dying to say something right now, but I think we have to mention that this team went to Florida and they scored in the opening drive, and I don't think they scored a touchdown for the rest of the game. They went to Alabama, had a decent first half, and then took their foot off the gas from there. Last year at South Carolina, the Gamecocks scored 5 touchdowns in their first 5 drives. This team has really struggled going on the road. What do you got?
The road's been really tough for them, too. Their 2 losses were both on the road, Florida and Alabama. They didn't struggle that much against Kentucky, but that was the only time on the road that they really showed
Kentucky
that
had a chance to win that game
late. They really did. And if you look at the rushing stats, although their rushing defense has been great, they've given up less than 80 yards at home. But on the road, it's 122 for opponents. So if you're able to get that noise going and you can play in front of the chains, you really have a chance to dominate the ground game. And that's exactly what Florida and Alabama did in their wins over Tennessee.
And you got to think, I know this is a big game for Tennessee. They're playing the Missouri's number 13 team in the country. If you're them, you're looking next week, Neyland Stadium hosting the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah.
And the game they want revenge from last year over, and maybe the East is out of the question, but Tennessee hasn't beaten Georgia in a while.
Yeah, they're the only team that actually has a chance left, because if Ole Miss somehow goes into Sanford and beats Georgia, and Tennessee beats Georgia at home at next week, like you said, then they would have the rubber match over Georgia and win the SEC East. It's a long shot.
I have my doubts on Ole Miss beating Georgia this Saturday, but crazier things have happened.
Exactly.
We'll now turn to what our writers are writing up this week after that 3-minute sidebar conversation. Our writers have great stuff planned for their features this Friday coming out in the Missourian. Wendell, I'll start with you. You're doing a season outlook of these next 3 games for the Tigers. Cody Schrader talked about it a little at the press conference in Athens. He said that there's still a lot to play for. Even even though they're not going to win the SEC East, what can they look forward to in these next 3 games?
Yeah, Cody had a great quote. He was like, "I don't believe in losing, I believe in learning." He's saying there's a lot that they can take from that experience in Georgia. And like even though the SEC East is off the table now, there's still a lot left to be gained this season. That's kind of what I talk about, just from looking at the standings here and what Mizzou can still do. Getting to 10 wins for the first time in a long time, and potentially getting to a New Year's Six bowl if things fall the right way in other conferences. But yeah, there's still a lot on the table for this team.
Adam, you're looking into the game preview, specifically Tennessee having a really strong rushing offense and rushing defense. We've already talked about the Vols a lot, but what else do you have to chime in on that?
I mean, it's something that's really important for this game is the ground game. It's going to be essential, and it goes down to run the ball. Like that's how you win football games. That's how you establish something. And Tennessee's been able to do it all year, and they've been able to stop it all year. So I just kind of go into a little more detail about how they've been able to do it and what they've been successful with. And I show a little bit of Missouri being able to stop that and be successful on the ground. One thing that is pretty striking about Tennessee is all 3 of their running backs are averaging over 5 yards a carry. They are the only team in the SEC to do that, and they are the only team in the SEC with 3 running backs in the top 20 for rushing yards.
Brandon, during a feature on one of the fan favorites here in Columbia, Harrison Mevis, the thicker kicker, talked about a 61-yard field goal against Kansas State, but he had also had a big field goal against Georgia, the one that gave Missouri a 13-10 lead, made him the all-time leading scorer in the history of the program. What did that moment mean for Harrison?
I think that moment meant a lot. He mentioned yesterday at media availability that he did know about it going in, and it was just a cool experience. He thanked, obviously, everybody's come along with him. But in my piece, I kind of detail a little bit about the journey there. Obviously, with kicking, sometimes people don't think about it as the operation. And a lot of it is you swap snappers, you swap holders, and it's been a year after year process. And so that's something that's contributed a little bit to his struggles kind of as of late. But obviously, he had such a tremendous start to his career at freshman and sophomore year, 40 of 45 on field goal attempts, stuff like that. So I just kind of dive into his journey, kind of what the feeling around that. And then Jeff Wolfert, who held the title, I also talked to him about that.
Yeah, we're excited to see all of that in the Missourian on Friday. Before we do game picks, we have another edition of Tiger Trivia. So this Saturday is going to be the first time that Missouri has hosted the 3:30, 2:30 Central Time CBS game on Saturday. They've hosted Arkansas basically every year on that game. But in that main CBS window, this is the first time this game has been at Faurot Field since 2012 when the Tigers lost to Alabama. I think it was 42-10. So we have a couple of trivia questions taking us back to the year 2012 all across the landscape. So we'll start with a college football specific one. I'll give multiple choice in this one because, our brains are a little foggy from 13 or 12 years ago. So which SEC quarterback had the most passing yards in 2012? Your options are A.J. McCarron, Johnny Manziel, Aaron Murray, or Tyler Bray, who was at Tennessee.
I'm going to go with Manziel. I feel like that's the obvious answer.
Johnny Football.
McCarron.
It was Aaron Murray, the Georgia quarterback, who's now calling games on the SEC Network. He was top, hitting 15 in passing yards that year. What about going over to the NFL? Who won the NFL MVP in 2012? Was it Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Adrian Peterson, or Aaron Rodgers?
Aaron Rodgers.
It was Aaron Rodgers.
You're all wrong. It was Adrian Peterson. That was off of the ACL injury. He was like 7 yards short of Eric Dickerson.
Next year was Rodgers, so was he 13?
So we're now going over to some pop culture from 2012.
I thought the world was ending this year.
Yeah, that was kind of on that same track. Which of these extremely popular movies had the highest grossing number in 2012? Was it the original Hunger Games, The Dark Knight Rises, The Avengers, or the final Twilight movie?
Oh my gosh.
Dark Knight Rises.
The Avengers.
I'm going Avengers.
It was Avengers. Let's go. That was like one of the all-time ever grossing. According to Billboard, what was the most popular song in 2012? Is it Somebody That I Used to Know, Call Me Maybe, What Makes You Beautiful, or We Are Young?
Oh my
Call
gosh.
Me Maybe.
That was fast answer from you, Haynes.
I'm going to go Somebody You Used to Know.
I'm going to go Call Me Maybe.
Adam Ryerson. That was number
You
one.
guys forget how big that song was.
And then
All those
lastly,
songs were massive. Right, that was different.
2012 was a Summer Olympic year over in England. So which country had the most medals in the 2012 Olympics? Was it USA, China, England, or Russia?
USA. I'm not overthinking this.
China.
It was USA. USA won by 12.
got
That is our
one.
Tiger
I got one.
Trivia. Taking us back to 2012, our director Travis was probably still an adult at that time. Thought to shout him out and call him old. No, he's not going to love that. We'll now turn to our game picks. Now what he's going to do, he's not going to put up the game picks when I ask him to. Wendell, I'll start with you, the Tigers and the Volunteers. Who has the edge? Who are you picking?
I'm taking Mizzou. This is a very evenly matched game, but I think Mizzou counters what Tennessee does best. I got Mizzou by 2 scores.
2 scores. Ryerson, sticking with the Tigers?
Yes, I am, but I do think that the Volunteers have the edge in this game, but they don't have the edge on the road, and that's why I'm going to go with Mizzou. I think that they take this one somewhere along the lines of 34-31. It's going to be a 1-score game.
I've circled this game all season as a potential trap for Mizzou. I think Tennessee gets the win, probably 28-23. Just their history against Mizzou, I think, is something with Josh Heupel. He just has a way against Mizzou, kind of like what Eli Drinkwitz does against Shane Beamer. I think it's a similar type of feel, so it's just something to watch out for.
Yeah, you mentioned these two extremely close in 12 and 13, but the last couple of years have been blowouts. Tennessee's had Missouri's number. I think I'm honestly a little biased towards here because I'm calling the game for the radio. And so the last 2 games I've called were unbelievable games down to the wire. Florida last year and then Boston College the year before. I think Missouri wins on a last-second touchdown. High scoring game, 31-20, or 31-30, I should say. A back-and-forth one, I think, that Drinkwitz and company pulled up. Travis, if you're not totally mad at me, throw it up there. 3-1. Look, what am I, 8-1? Am I seeing that right? Wow.
Wendell,
I have a healthy lead right now.
Place.
Wendell rolled the dice last weekend. Didn't work out.
Could have. In another universe, it did.
Yeah, maybe one where Missouri has better special teams play and force a couple turnovers. But hopefully they do those exact things this Saturday against the Tennessee Volunteers. We'll be back next Monday to recap the Tigers and the Volunteers and begin to look ahead to the Florida game next weekend. I'm Harrison Vapnek. This has been the Tiger Kickoff Show.